You can't have stapled visas to a bunch of athletes from Arunachal Pradesh, which is an integral part of India. If the Chinese are going to do this, and mind you, they've been doing this from 2009-10 when the UPA was in power, then India should start giving stapled visas to those from Tibet. Quid pro quo.
Well, Zaka, the message is loud and clear that we will not accept anything of this sort, and they have to be made very clear that Arunachal is very much part of India. They should not even think of or any sort of misadventure with us, Arunachal, even of a smallest thing like issuing a staple visa to our residents of Arunachal. One. Secondly, China has to be very clear on this also, that it's not India of 2000 or earlier, it's India which is of 2023, which will talk on equal terms and terms which are suitable and conducive to us, not terms which are conducive to you. Thirdly, if any sort of, I reiterate, any sort of misadventure at the border will be responded back.
All right, we've lost the line with RP Singh. We'll go back to him in a moment. General Kulkarni, the stapled visa is just a symptom of the problem. The problem, actually, the diagnosis of the problem is that China thinks, and it claims all of Arunachal Pradesh, it refuses to recognize the LAC or the McMahon line. And it basically, has gone to the extent of even renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh. The point is, India still continues, in all its official documentation, continues to insist on what is called the One China policy. If China can't agree on one India, which includes Arunachal Pradesh, then why should India continue to parrot this One China policy? We should say that Tibet is a separate entity.
Thank you, Zaka. I think Chinese believe in the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without a fight. And I fully agree with you that it's time, because it's been on since 2010. And when the Northern Army commander was given a stapled visa and he did not go there. But they have been on and off. When subsequently, before that, JJ went, he wasn't given a stapled visa. And when, these kind of things, just because at that point of time they said Jammu and Kashmir is disputed, now Arunachal is disputed, they call it South Tibet, and all this has been happening since about 2010. I think it's time the Chinese understand that we too are neighbors and that we are both old civilizations. It's not the way that, despite all the treaties since 1993, peace and tranquility, border management, all of it there, the Chinese have violated it. And look what they've done it in 2020 and subsequently. I think if China wants good relations with India, it is better that China at least does not indulge in issuing staple visas, which are definitely unacceptable and shows high-handedness that, well, we can get away with it. The same athletes are likely to be participating as part of Asian Games, which are going to be held in China from September 23rd. Well, if that be so, then the entire event may just be called off by India saying that, well, staple visas are not acceptable. They have to be, and I'm sure China understands, but these kind of tactics by the Chinese is definitely not acceptable. I go along with you that yes, if not staple visas, we should start giving them boarding visas to the Chinese coming from Tibet to India, because that's the only way tit for tat.
So I want to ask Einar Tangen, the contention that China has always had with India is over the line of actual control. It's largely over the fact that, both sides have differing perceptions and it's not been demarcated, so on and so forth. But in the case of Arunachal, the first big official claim from the Chinese government came in the early 2000s. For a good 40, 50 years after both countries became independent, there was no claim over Arunachal. It was always over Aksai Chain or what is called the western and middle sectors in India. But it was never over the eastern side. And that really came to the fore only in the early 2000s. And, the point that is being made is Arunachal Pradesh was always an integral part of India. Just because the Chinese conveniently found that there is a Tibetan Buddhist shrine, a very holy shrine that happens to be based in Arunachal Pradesh, you can't just lay claim over 3,000-4,000 square kilometers of land, because if that were the contention, then why did you go back in 1962? In 1962, if your claim was that you claim all of Arunachal Pradesh, then you went back. There was no concept of, a Buddhist shrine back then in 1962 when the war happened. So the point that is being made is that this is a double standard that's being enforced by China, perhaps with an eye on what's happening in the Western sector, perhaps with an eye on the strategic import of what is happening in Aksai Chin. But you can't just raise a claim on a piece of territory which you've never had any claim to for thousands of years.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
Yes. The question is, why did China suddenly wake up after 50 years to claim a part of Indian territory, sovereign Indian territory, which you never claimed for 50 years?
Well, first off, India as a nation didn't really exist many, many years ago. I mean, it's a compilation of things that were put together by the British Empire and then named India.
Come on. No, 1 sec.
No,
I take grave
want,
offense to that, and it's factually incorrect. I'm sorry. I can educate you about Indian history, but to say that India as a nation did not exist before the British is absolutely, pedestrian knowledge of India. But go on.
All right. Well, it was a series of different entities that you can call India, but did not exist as India itself. So, I mean, you don't know,
Mr. Tangen, that the word India comes from the Indus Valley civilization, which is thousands of years old, right? You don't know that.
That's another thing.
I mean, come on, I don't want to make this debate on contemporary politics between India and China into a history lesson, but surely the word India comes from the Indus Valley civilization, which is a good 1,000+ years old. Anyway, go on.
Yes, it is indeed, but that does not necessarily mean that it was in existence. Let's go to 1962. The narrative from India is that it was attacked by China. China's narrative, backed up by numerous historians outside of India, including Western, say that it was India that precipitated the attack. China was successful in repelling India. They went in. They did, after being successful, withdraw 20 kilometers back. Now, that was an issue because they thought that this was an opportunity to achieve a peace settlement. Since that time, the line of actual control has been an ongoing issue. In terms of what is happening today and things, China says that it has the right to that area because it was an integral part of Tibet. That can be argued on both sides. All right. I'm not saying that I know for certain. The fact is that if you turn over any rock in any particular piece of land, it does not say who it belongs to. Historically, these areas have been in flux.
No, one second, Mr. Tangen. I'm sorry again. I don't want to go back into a history lesson, but the McMahon line, as I understand, was drawn in 1914-15. One second. The McMahon line in eastern India was drawn in 1914-15. Right. At that time, I could argue that there was no PRC. There was no China as it exists. It was Tibet. It was British India.
The line was never
and the line was drawn at that time. Now, I'm willing to buy your argument. I'm willing to buy your argument that the Chinese government could not recognize a line that was agreed upon by the Tibetan Kingdom and by British India. I'm okay with that. I find some merit in that argument. But my point is, you cannot, after 50 years, suddenly realize and suddenly start claiming 3,000 square kilometers in eastern India by saying, oh, by the way, one of the biggest shrines in Tibetan Buddhism happens to be there. One of the holiest figures in Tibetan Buddhism has been in exile from your country for the last 50 years. What about that?
Okay. Well, let's get to the issue at hand. You want to talk about the relations between India and China.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as your guests and you have pointed out, the issue of stapled visas has been around since 2009. So to claim surprise at this point seems a little odd. So far this year, in 2023, China has issued over 71,600 visas to Indians for various things, business, family, etc. India has not issued any visas, very, very few, and only in very exceptional cases. So, at this juncture, China is trying to reach out, in their opinion, and they're being rebuffed by India. see, from Beijing's point of view, this seems like a contrived way of trying to embarrass China at a time when, Asian countries are supposed to be pulling together. It is up to India whether it has its
in case you
teams go
missed it,
to these
in
university
2020,
games.
in
But you're
2020, the
depriving these
world